Carol Gundlach, we're gonna be talking over the next couple of weeks about the legislative session as it is now in session. It started on Tuesday, and so for our first interview about this, and maybe we'll bring her on after we get off the air. We'll keep going with her if she has some time potentially. But she's a policy analyst for Alabama Arise, and she's our next guest. So Carol, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it.
I'm glad to do it.
Great. So first, I want to ask, the American Rescue Plan was passed some time ago, nearing a year, and I guess my expectation was that maybe the funds had not been expended yet, but that they had been obligated already, as in there have already been decisions made about where the money would be spent, but apparently that's not the case. Is that right?
It is kind of the case. The legislature last session, appropriated some money from the American Rescue Plan. Initially, they appropriated $400 million to build new prisons in the state. And of course, that's a very controversial decision. A lot of people are not happy about it. The leadership of the legislature and the governor felt it was needed. But that took up about $400 million of the $1 billion we had received so far from the federal government. Now there's another $1 billion coming in about 6 months. And then the legislature also appropriated $80 million to help out hospitals and nursing homes that were really struggling during the COVID outbreak. So that was $480 million that has been spent out of a little bit over $1 billion. There's about $580 million left that we expect the legislature to appropriate sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Interesting. So why is it that that 500 some odd million was not appropriated before?
I think it wasn't appropriated before because they were not in agreement about where it needed to go. We have several years to spend this money, and there was a real desire, I think, to spend it wisely and well in what was really going to be investments for the state, not to spend it in a hurry. The other thing is, just last week, maybe the week before, the United States Department of the Treasury issued their final rules on what that money could be spent on. And, there was already questions about whether or not we could spend it on prisons. I think they didn't want to obligate $1 billion without being sure that it was being spent where the federal government would allow it to be spent.
Yeah, well, so you said that there was just a ruling on the restrictions, and apparently the restrictions don't include building prisons, so they must be pretty lax. What are the restrictions? Like, what are some of the broad overview of, like, what can the money be spent on and what can't it be spent on?
It can be spent on anything that would consider to be infrastructure. Some percentage of it can be spent to replace lost state revenue during the recession, and the formula for determining whether or not state revenue has been lost is, I guess I would say, it's a non-intuitive formula. And that is where they were able to spend the money on prisons, because that was less than the revenue that the state lost under this formula. It cannot be spent on Medicaid, and it cannot be spent on retiring debt or on replacing money that is given away in a tax cut.
Interesting. So it cannot be used to expand Medicaid?
It cannot. We very much would have wanted it to be used that way. Now, well, Medicaid expansion is a whole nother issue, but we could argue that you could spend the money on other costs of state government, thereby freeing up money that could be used to expand Medicaid.
Interesting. So have you been able to, as somebody who's following this issue, have you been able to get a sense of what some of the likely expenditures of the American Rescue Plan dollars are? As in, what is the Republican majority looking most closely at using these dollars for?
Yes, we did get some kind of a preview late last week, yesterday or the day before. We think that they are looking at broadband expansion, particularly in rural areas. We all know, and I live in a very rural area, and so I'm extremely aware of the broadband needs in our rural counties. So it can be spent for that. They can spend it to replace revenue that has been lost through the unemployment compensation system, to rebuild that trust fund. Now, we would probably argue that that is not the best expenditure of the money, but I believe that the legislature is going to do that. I think they're going to probably try to spend some more of it on helping rural hospitals, which have really been struggling, and we've been losing rural hospitals. And so I think they are going to put some of it into healthcare. It can be spent on kind of mitigating the impact of COVID. And I expect to see an appropriation to our Department of Public Health for that purpose. That's a good thing to do because the Department of Public Health has been chronically underfunded, and they really need some more resources.
Right. And that the public broadband or investment in broadband, rural broadband sounds really good to me. It's crazy how bad the internet is in rural parts of the state. I live 40 minutes outside of the largest city in the state of Alabama, and my internet is terrible. It's awful. And I have the best, most premium package that you can get. I pay more for terrible internet 35 minutes away from the city than I paid for Google Fiber when I lived downtown. I mean, it's crazy. And so I can't imagine actually living in one of the super, super rural areas, on top of the mountains or a skyline or something like that. Internet up there is just, I've been up there. It's even worse. I can't imagine having to deal with that in today's society. I'd like to wrap our discussion with what Alabama Arise, what is the agenda that Alabama Arise would put forward for the use of the American Rescue Plan dollars?
Yes, I think that's a really great question. And if people will go to our website, which is alarise.org, you can find there our principles on what American Rescue Plan money should be spent on. I actually have a blog coming out early next week that lists some infrastructure proposals that we've got, since we think this money is going to get spent on infrastructure. One of the big ones is on water system improvements all over the state. And we do think that is one of the things the legislature and the governor are proposing. We can get behind that if the water system improvements are targeted to the communities that need them the most. Right. And by that, we're really thinking of some of the Alabama Black Belt counties like Lowndes County and Perry, Wilcox, that have terrible water system problems, terrible wastewater system problems, and that need an infusion of investment that the local communities just cannot afford to fix those wastewater issues. We know the legislature is planning on spending a lot of money on water system improvements. We hope they target them to the right places, and we're going to be watching that real closely. We're in general support on broadband. Now, I will say the infrastructure bill has been passed, and that money is coming right behind the ARPA money. There is so much money for broadband in that bill that, I'm a little hesitant about spending a lot of the ARPA money on it, but you know, but we agree that that's important. Again, particularly for our school children and our schools, which are, many of them are remote right now. We think that there are things we need to do for people who are still struggling that are really kind of human resource issues. We'd love to see bonus pay for low wage workers who have been working in places like grocery stores and retail and places where they've been exposed to COVID. We very much do want to see investments in the healthcare system. I think I'd said the Department of Public Health really needs some support, and we need to stop the hemorrhaging of our rural hospitals around the state. Of course, Medicaid expansion would solve that problem also. But as I said, we can't spend ARPA money on that. We would like to see some of the new money be spent on something really boring, but that's really needed, which is to improve the technology used by state government. We all know how awful it was when people could not apply for unemployment compensation. They couldn't get through on the telephone. The computer systems were down. The checks weren't coming. We saw those people sitting in the parking lot at Alabama State University in Montgomery, driving for hours so they could get there and sit there overnight in order to apply for unemployment compensation. That just wasn't necessary. And that the solution to that is a really boring solution, which is called good computer systems. So we think that this is an opportunity.
It's boring, but if you were one of those people, trying to call the unemployment office, it will resonate with you.
Yes.
And and also, anyone who's worked for any government agency, and to some extent even including public schools, how poor the computer systems and just technical, it's 2022. It's time for state government to at least have functional computers.
It is. And we'd love to see one-stop shopping for assistance. A whole lot of people got unemployed really quickly last spring. They had never applied for food stamps. They had never applied for unemployment benefits. They'd never applied for health care coverage in their lives. Never had to. And then all of a sudden they were eligible and didn't know how to go about applying for any of the assistance they were eligible for. We'd like to see a one-stop shop where you could simply go to a computer somewhere in Montgomery and apply for everything you are eligible for.
That
and
seems so common sense.
Yeah, right. It is common sense.
It really is. Yeah. And if you're someone who's been laid off, perhaps for the first time in your life, or you are facing, real economic despair, like for the first time ever, and you don't know how to navigate these really complicated bureaucracies and which agency does what, all the different benefits, there's different requirements. So even what meager help we have available for regular people, as inadequate as it is often very difficult to actually access.
Yeah, very difficult. You look at the people who are trying to get rental assistance right now, and how it's just spread all over. Who does it in every city in the state's different. And so, we'd like for people to be able to not worry about what agency is providing the service. They can just go apply in one place. And so we're suggesting that the state invest some money in upgrading our technology and getting us, like you said, into the at least the 21st century, if not the 22nd.
Right. And that's so, why would you not do that? The only reason to continue to maintain an outdated, clunky, and difficult to operate system is to keep more people who deserve the aid, who, by the metrics of the statutes that appropriate the funds, the only function it serves to have a clunky system is to keep people who are eligible for the funds from the funds. Because if they're not eligible for it, then they won't be able to get it no matter how quick and easy the system that they apply for it is. If people want to say that, oh, there should be less people getting the getting this help, then they should address that through legislation as opposed to just making it difficult for people who are eligible for the monies to get the funds. So I mean, it's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah,
but
I've always viewed that as a form of sabotage.
Right.
Where our government does actually do things remotely positive for people, which is unfortunately not enough. It's often, sabotage, whether it's deliberate or not, really doesn't matter to the person on the other end who can't get the help they need.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or
Carol,
who don't have the time to, it takes a long time. People spend a lot of time on those phones trying to get their unemployment.
And as someone who's had a toddler running around while trying to be on hold for an hour with state agencies, it's not easy, and not everybody can do that. And I'm someone, I'm a fairly well-educated person who I've dealt with these things on a professional basis. So, if you're someone who you have multiple toddlers running around, or an elder parent that you're taking care of at the same time, it can just be very, very difficult. And like you said, Jacob, either you want people to get the help or you don't.
Right. That is the whether you want people to get help or you don't that is an issue to be worked out in the parameters of the legislation, not by making it difficult to access the help once it's been appropriated. And that's I don't think that's a crazy position. And these and the people that say that government is slow and it's not. They're
maybe
the ones that make it
that way. So yes,
right.
Maybe
They're the
that's
ones
intentional.
Exactly. They're the ones that make it so. I mean, we're talking about right now, Louis DeJoy, the Postmaster General, implementing policies that are going to make mail delivery slower, literally make mail delivery slower, and for no and then people are going to talk about, oh, my mail is delivered so slow, blah blah blah.
So maybe
we
need to privatize it, or maybe we need to use FedEx.
And it was a conscious decision by these people who hate government to make government more difficult to use. So anyway, Carol, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you going over with us and talking some more to us. Adam, you said that Alabama Arise had a workshop or something that you wanted to make sure that we plugged?
I believe Alabama Arise has a lobby day coming up where they encouraged members and supporters to come down and learn firsthand in Montgomery about these issues and visit with their legislators, and wanted to make sure you had a chance, Carol, to at least share that with our audience and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we do have a lobby day coming up, and I am looking up when it is because I can't remember. It is in February. I can remember much.
Actually, I do have the flyer, so I can at least help you out on the dates there.
You can help me with that.
To participate in person, you need to register online by February 8th. Again, just go to Alabama Arise's website, alarise.org. And you can check that out. And it looks like the lobby day itself is going to be on Tuesday, February 15th. So at least on February 15th, we know there will be some people in Montgomery fighting for working people. Even if it's not there all the time, we know there will be a big crowd of folks to do that. So I don't know if you had anything else to expand on that, Carol.
It's just a lot. It is a lot of fun. And people don't realize how much fun it is to come to an Arise Lobby Day. You learn a lot, and it's really enjoyable. We're trying to keep it small this year because of COVID. But we're going to have online options, and it's really empowering. It's to talk to your legislator. Most of the people in the legislature are pretty nice men and women, because you have to get elected. And they like talking to their constituents. They just don't know a whole lot about what a lot of their constituents' lives are really like. And so it's a great opportunity to tell your elected officials what you want them to hear from you. So we encourage you to register and to participate. And like I said, we're going to have online options.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carol. I appreciate it.
We appreciate it too. You all take care, and I enjoyed this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.